Okay, this video is for masochists only. I've got a break in my client work, so I'm making this video. Ha! What I want to do is show you the difference in meter styles to give you a sense of how you go about finding the meter. It's not easy. I mean, sometimes it's easy, like what you see on screen in Psalm 90. It's kind of a no-brainer. But with Mary's Magnificat, it's not easy. So I want to show you where she's coming from first by going back to what she's taking it from. All right? We got here on screen Psalm 90, and it's divided into 7 paragraphs. That's the style of Bible Hebrew meter that Mary's using when she uses Greek words, okay, because she's Jewish, okay? Just like Paul is using Bible Hebrew meter with Greek words because he's Jewish. You know, Christ is Jewish. I don't know why people forget that. All right, it's real easy to understand Psalm 90's significance, and the Jews know this, but they don't recognize that it's 84, 70, 70, 70, 56. They recognize the 350, but their tradition is based on Jubilee accounting. So they mistake this as 750s, and that's where they get the common Jewish idea that history has 7,000 years to run. They get that from a false book that's they accredit too much to, called the Book of Enoch. There is no such thing as a Book of Enoch. If Enoch really wrote a book, it would have been in Enoch's language, which was not, Coptic. All right? God preserves the real words that he caused the real writers to write in their own tongue that they originally wrote. Okay? So there's no such thing as a Book of Enoch, but, the Book of Jubilees, which is another apocryphal thing, comes out of, an alleged Book of Enoch, and that's why they misaccount Psalm 90, which is the biblical origin of the doctrine of time. They account that as 750s. This is where the Jews are making their mistake. And of course their Seder Olam Rabbah, which is the basis for their current calendar, is also wrong. It chops off about 300 years. That's a long story why that happened, and I'm not going to get into that here. But the point is you see on screen a very even, obvious division of the meter. It's divisible by 7 at 84, first divisible at 63, which I've already explained in the Psalm 90 videos. It's divisible in 84. Here's the theme. There's always a theme when it's divisible by 4. Okay? That's the theme of the next divisible by 7. That's the next theme is Adam. The third theme when divisible by 7 is Noah. Then Moses' own, also divisible by 7 at 70 syllables. Then finally Purim, the future Purim. Okay? Now, when Moses wrote this, I don't know if he knew it was going to be called Purim or that Purim was going to be the issue. But he did know it was going to be a problem. And that was what he was warning Israel about by making it 56. It's really important because I want to show you the origin of the rhetorical meaning of these numbers. They're rhetorical meanings. They're meant to communicate doctrine. This is not, repeat not, Bible codes. They are predictive of history, but they're not Bible codes. They're meant to teach you where you are in time. God has a doctrine of time. Israel was on a schedule. So each one of these numbers has a doctrinal meaning. 84 is the plan of God being completed. All right? 70 is the voting period in history. I went through that extensively in the Psalm 90 videos to show you from Adam forward how time is designed by God in 490, 70, and 490, equaling 1050. So there are 5 1050s in history. History was supposed to end pre-church at 5250, the last 1050 being the Millennium. That's encoded up here by means of 70 plus 14, because down here, that 14 was in jeopardy. The voting period might not play. I went into extreme detail in the Psalm 90 playlist. You can look that up. But just know here, this is the meaning of 84. It's going to be really important when we look at Mary. Okay, so 84 represents 70 70 is a voting period. God votes, that's 35. The other 35 was supposed to be the believer. Pre-Israel, it was still a historical voting period. Post-Israel, it's still a voting period. We got our 70-year voting period that ended, well, our 490, our current 490 ends in 2130. Okay, if my math is right. So our last 490 started with the Reformation. And duh, we know what that was about. Okay, so it's the history follows the meaning. So this was a voting period for believers to vote. And if they didn't vote properly, history was going to end. Well, Adam voted, and so did, the people in the Genesis 5 roster. That's why Genesis 5 exists. So it was a voting period. Okay, the next one was Noah. Noah voted during the 70-year voting period of history. Okay, and this was the time when he voted. All right. And then Moses also, his own vote occurred during another historical voting period of history. Here's the period measured in years from Adam's fall that he voted. That's the theme of Psalm 90. It's telling you the orchestration of time. Here, the problem was that the Jews might not vote, and therefore time was going to end. So the extra 14 is a promise by God that he will complete time. That totals 350. This is also doubles as the number of years from when Moses wrote to when the judges ended and the Israelites rejected God as king in favor of Saul. It's got a double calendar function. And I covered all that in the Psalm 90 videos. What I want you to see here is the doctrinal significance of the numbers and how simple it is to know what Moses was saying. All right, 84 is 70 plus 14 because here we got a jeopardy. So 56 comes to mean in the meter that you can't see in English, it comes to mean, hi, there's a problem. All right? So when you see somebody after Moses using 56s, and we're going to get to the next person after Moses in a minute, once you see somebody using 56s, that means warning. The vote might not complete. Okay? 70 means the vote completed. God's vote is 35. The vote of man is 35. That's what these 70 signify. And that's why history continued past the 70. And God is saying, hi, there's going to be a 14-year shortage, that Israel is going to not vote properly, and I'm going to solve that problem. That's the most important thing to understand. The 14 comes to signify how God rescues time. It's essential to understanding what Mary is doing and essential to understanding what Paul is doing. Okay, that 14 represents pregnancy in God. See, here it is. If you look at the text of verses 1 through 4 in Psalm 90, it basically says God is pregnant with everybody, and he makes everybody return to dust, meaning return to God. All right? Before the mountains were born, or the land, meaning Israel, or the world was created, you, God. That's what verse 2, Psalm 90 verse 2 says. So it's saying that God is pregnant with all creation. That's the idea. Mary's going to play on that. She's going to make a big stink about this 84. All right? But Moses started the ball rolling. This sets a precedence for the meter. So this 14 is a big deal. It's subtracted from here and put up here, meaning that God is going to make it happen. That 14 is pregnant in God. Got that? All right. So now we go to the next guy who is playing on those same meters. This is Isaiah 53 in Hebrew, and I'm not showing you any translation or anything because I want you to see the meter. I'll just explain this to you. Okay, this first part here, 42 syllables, is half of the 84 we saw in verses 1 through 4 of Psalm 90. And he closes it to show pregnancy, time being pregnant in God. He closes Isaiah 53 with the same 42 syllables. Mary's going to play on this. That's why I'm showing it to you. But notice how clear the meter is. There's a guy named Moeller who found the Isaiah scroll or talks about the Isaiah scroll. And the big debate for at least 150 years has been whether the Isaiah scroll reveals that the original Hebrew has missing words. And it's because of that argument that I got involved in this whole meter thing. I'd asked God, I said, how do I prove what my pastor contended, that believers buy time, which is based on Genesis 5, that was his teaching. How do I prove that in the Bible? Just Genesis 5 wouldn't be the only passage proving it. And he led me on this journey. And I ended up getting involved in Isaiah, and I have a thing for meter. And it's like, okay, well, if I can find the meter in Isaiah, I can find out if they're missing words. And it took me like 3 years to work on this, okay? And once I found the meter, I tried back translating the Hebrew into Greek and vice versa to find out what it was. And then suddenly it dawned on me, how to parse it. And this is what you're seeing on screen is what I found. And I recorded that discovery. I was so shocked about it back in 2008. It's in the Isaiah 53 meter hypothesis playlist. And you'll see that I went through like 4 different hypotheses before I found this. Because it was all a live journaling of the Isaiah, struggle, trying to figure out how he had metered. And this was the final one. And I found out about Psalm 90 later. And it perfectly matches Psalm 90. This is 42. This is 42. All right? So, our dear boy, Isaiah, is playing on Psalm 90's 84 there. You can see that. He divides it in two. Psalm 90 verses 1 through 4 is about time being pregnant in God. So before Messiah is born, Isaiah takes his thematic meter as the first David, which is right through here, because the first David dies at age 77. And then he makes it go to, that's Isaiah 52, 13 through 15, which is where in Hebrew Isaiah 53 begins. And then he closes it here showing that Messiah is pregnant in God. Because he wasn't born yet. But they had known by Isaiah's day, 2 Samuel 7, that Daniel's greater son was going to be Messiah. So, metrically, when you memorize this in Hebrew, you'd notice these meter patterns and you would be caused to remember the meter pattern in Psalm 90 on the same theme of Messiah being pregnant in God, the promise of the millennium being in verse 4 of Psalm 90. Okay, and that's what Isaiah is playing on when he does this here. All right, and then look at the next meter pattern. Then he launches into a future history of Israel's kings, beginning here with Hezekiah in 712 BC, when he was currently ministering to Hezekiah, and the birth of his son Manasseh. It was due to Manasseh that the temple would fall. That's in 2 Kings. I quote the verses and everything like that in the Daniel series of Psalm 90 playlist. I want to say it's 2 Kings 22 or 21, something like that. That's Manasseh. That covers the period of Manasseh. And down here at 133, syllable 133, is where Manasseh goes into captivity. All right? Because this is an annual timeline. There's a 252 syllable hiatus between Isaiah 52:15, which starts right here. Okay, and Isaiah 53:1, there's a 252 syllable hiatus that Isaiah inserts. They all use ellipsis, as you saw here in Psalm 90. See, there's ellipsis. This is Adamic, and then there's an ellipsis of 980 years. So here's another ellipsis, another 980 years. There's an ellipsis, and then another 980 years, and ellipsis. Okay? So Isaiah uses ellipsis also. Consequently, the ellipsis begins here in 712 BC, and it's measured at what? 56. What do we see 56 mean in Moses? 56 meant high, Israel's in danger, the voting period might not complete. All right? So that's what Isaiah plays on, and he does it twice, God-man. Okay? All of these, you'll notice, these are all bookends. This is really important. 42 with 42. And then we got 56 covering the period of Hezekiah and Manasseh. And then 56, and at this point, the temple is down. And this 56 is the voting to rebuild it. Israel wasn't voting to rebuild it. I mean, she ended up voting, but this is the sum of the 49 that Israel was in captivity plus the 7 years extra owed on the 49. That was, the 49 years missed sabbatical years from Rehoboam forward. So that's why Isaiah's putting the other 56 there. And then here is 35 syllables, plus here in verses 4, this is the lower 70 is verse 3, this is verse 4, this is verse 4 here, and where you see the 203 here, let me cover it here, the 203 right here, that's when the temple goes down. And the text in Isaiah that corresponds to that is meaning God violated. Yeah, his temple is violated. It goes down. That's 586 BC. And then the next 56 years are all trouble. All right? Israel returns to the land in 538. Daniel times his prayer 7 years prior to this 56 elapsing. He times it based on the Isaiah chronology. And he matches his meter based on the Isaiah chronology, which we're going to get to in a minute. And then the next 70 years after that, of course, is the voting period that Moses was talking about here. Right down here, it was 56 then. Okay? But it ends up completing. That's what Isaiah is forecasting. He's updating Moses and saying, hi, the temple will be rebuilt and it will complete. And then, and notice that he's making all this text run underneath the text that's ostensibly and truly about Messiah. He's tying the advent of Messiah to the kings, because it's first David to last David. He's showing how the history is still going to lead to Messiah, but because the past is prologue, he's showing how the bad votes are going to continue even when Messiah comes. That's why the text of Isaiah 53 reads as it does. Okay? When he gets here, he's talking about the period of Nehemiah, going back, the story of that, because Esther and everything took place in here. This is 460 BC by the time this ends. This 329. In the Isaiah chronology, this is 460 BC. Then he's coming down here, and this is the period of Nehemiah, rebuilding the walls, and right down to here is the completion of the voting period that led to the completion of the book of Malachi in 397. Okay, that was the total end of the voting period. All right, which he is showing as being short 7 years because the temple occupied, 7 years of rebuilding, and he's making credits and debits. That's another story he's doing. Okay, but here, once he gets here, he's reinstated time. There's a syllable. There's 364 at this point in time, right here. All right, he's at 397 BC. There is another ellipsis of 364 years because God was going to reinstate the time the temple was down. The temple was up. First temple was up 364 years. So God's going to reimburse that. Isaiah is essentially predicting that by means of ellipsis. He puts it in there so that this period here is starting, I want to say it's 33 or 28 BC. Okay? And so he's matching the what do you want to call it, pivotal nature of that time, which is when Augustus came to power. All right? To this period, because Israel was in danger in both of these periods. Okay? She was in danger of falling in both of these periods. So he's likening it to the same thing. In other words, God hired Cyrus, then he hired Persia, then he hired Greece. Okay? And because he did that, and of course Daniel will get that update, because he did that, Israel was going to be able to continue existing despite herself. Okay, Daniel's going to play on all this. That's why I got to show it to you. So is Mary going to play on it. Now, when Mary talks, she's now, at this point in Isaiah 53:12, right at the beginning, and she knows it. And her own meter is going to focus, therefore, on 42, which we just saw was pregnant from ever since Psalm 90, showing how the pregnant 14 of history gets completed, which is now in her womb. The day she's told by Elizabeth she's pregnant. All right? That's when she says the Magnificat. So she plays on the 42 of Psalm 90 and Isaiah. You can see it very clearly here just from the numbers. And of course, when you match the text, it's even funnier. All right? The text and the numbers always interface. They always interlock in order to give you more understanding, so you can be real precise about knowing what the scripture means. You have to mull it over. You have to turn it over. You have to evaluate it. You can't just read it like a novel. All right? So this is time being pregnant, and now she's pregnant with Messiah, and it's updating there. That's Isaiah, that's Psalm 90 that Mary plays on. Okay, but there's another writer, okay, that Mary's going to play on. And this is the one where it gets really hard, and I need to understand this better in order to know her meter. This guy is Daniel. Okay, let me go to the beginning. Okay, you can get all these things I'm showing you in the video will be linked in the video description, so you can look at them yourself. This is about Daniel. I've already covered this in the Psalm 90 playlist, but it's relevant to what Mary does also. So this is the basic organization and structure of Daniel's meter. It's very long. And Daniel's meter in particular goes all the way through the kings from David forward. Mary's going to do the same thing. When Daniel does his meter, he plays on Isaiah 53 and on Psalm 90, but it's syncopated. By doing it syncopated, he's stressing the fact that Israel kept sinning, which of course his text already says. He's matching his meter to the meaning of the text. That's what the meter is for. So what I had to do, it took me forever to figure this out. This is really complicated. This here that you can download is a map of his meter. In the verse in the left-hand corner, you can see the verse. This is the number of Hebrew syllables it is, right here. Okay, this is the cumulative number of syllables. And then what he's doing in order to track to Isaiah, because he's using 2 time tracks, he takes the differences in the sevenings. Like here it's divisible by 7, and here it's divisible by 7, and the difference is where he tracks to Isaiah. It's awesome how he does this. But you'll notice that you don't have, look, this is 49, and then it doesn't equal, you got a 49 here and a 49 here. You got 49, and it doesn't equal, it's not divisible by 7 until 182. Then we got 385, and then here's the pregnant 434, that's the 62 weeks. Okay, see, God's response to Daniel is based on Daniel's own meter. And then we got 476, which is showing 14 short. Well, actually 24, but that's another story. And here, the ending meter is 742. Let me unblock it so you can see it's 742, which is 56 short. Remember? Psalm 90, 56. He's using the same convention. Vote short. Israel's vote is going to be short. He knows that. That's the whole basis of his petition to God. Hi, we're not voting the way we should. Okay, and of course in those days they didn't have a whole 70 unit. They had to do it every 7 years because they were the poster boy for God. They were the place where you could vote with your feet and go to Israel and find God. That's what was centrally located in the world, nexus of 3 continents. That's why Israel's located where she is. It's a tiny nation, but everybody travels through it. That's the point. So you can find God pretty easily along well-known travel routes. So Daniel's method here is just really weird. You got a 49 and a 49. That means the text between is bookended. You got a 42 and a 42. These are divisible by 7 paragraphs. So that's a bookend. You got a 69, meaning vote short, 1 week short of 70. Here and here. It's really obvious what he means by it doctrinally. Excuse me. But it's not simple. The meter is not, look, the meter here is real simple. Simple paragraphs, very easily understood. The meter in Isaiah is really simple. Simple paragraphs, easily understood. But not in Daniel. Because sin is never simple. So Mary's going to mix elements of the syncopated nature of Daniel in her own, as you can see here. Okay? Remember, the gold color, the orange color, is divisible by 7. But she's got a lot of, this is 30, that's divisible by 3. 12 is divisible by 3. Okay, she's using the 47 of Daniel 9:19 here. Then she got 54. I mean, she's got a lot of just like Daniel did, she's got a lot of non-divisible by 3, non-divisible by 7 sections in it. And the question, of course, is why? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But when you look at her whole poem right here, I have to, because it's stupid black that word uses. When you look at the orange numbers here, you can see a definite pattern. You got 35 plus 7, that's 42. Hello, does that ring a bell? Then there's a 21 in between, pregnant. Then 35 plus 7, that's another 42. Then 28, closing with two 42s. The two 42s, of course, refer back to where? Up here. She's making a play on Psalm 90. She's showing that Psalm 90 is going to, the promise of the millennium is going to happen. That's her theme. And she's showing pregnancy when she does this. She's got 42 here, look, 42. And then another 42. And then in between is 21. That stands for vote being germinated, 3 generations. Okay, 42 itself stands for germinating. God votes, that's 35. Man starts to vote, that's the 7. And it's got a connotation of tribulation in it. In other words, when man starts to vote to respond to God, Satan has to make trouble. And of course, man, when he starts to respond to God, is usually responding to God because he's been negative and he's being punished, so he has to respond. And of course, 7 plus 21 equals 28, which is where, Isaiah kept, see, we saw that 28 from Isaiah. That's back up here. See the 28s? Voting in times of trouble. Okay, voting in times of trouble. See how she's playing to Isaiah? All right. And then we got another 40, we got another 35. God votes again. And then there's still time of trouble. And then she shows 28, just like Isaiah does. She doesn't break it into 2 units. And then God's purpose being revealed. So it's really obvious doctrinally what she's doing. All right? But to get there, she's not doing it even. She's got all this craziness in between. All right? And even the craziness in between, the numbers are doctrinally significant. And the question, I still don't know the answer to this yet. I have to look at it and find out why. Her job is to date back. She has to pick up where Daniel leaves off. Okay, and Daniel leaves off down here in 919. Daniel leaves off with 47 syllables. Mary's going to use that. The time period that Daniel's tracking to when he does that is dual. Okay? On time track 2 here, Daniel's tracking to the Isaiah timeline. In time track 1, he's just going straight forward from his own captivity, coming full circle and then going forward in time. This is a straightforward track from his current moment of praying to the future that God had already shown him in Daniel's chapter 2 forward. That ends with the rise of Macedon and Alexander the Great. Okay, that's the time period where he stops. Okay, and on track 2, where he's tracking to Isaiah's timeline, he ends with the rise of Rome. And he's doing that by taking the differences between the 7s here and tying to key syllables in the Isaiah timeline All these are key syllables in the Isaiah timeline to get his second track. And you'll have to read this to see the whole thing. It's very complicated. All right, that's what Mary's got to piggyback on. She's got to piggyback on the meaning of Alexander and Rome, which of course then leads to Hanukkah, because Hanukkah came about as a result of Alexander. You know, Alexander dies, then you have the Diadochi, which are the 4 generals, all right, and one of their sons, Seleucus, had his own dynasty, and Antiochus IV was of that dynasty, and because, as predicted in Daniel 11, because he didn't quite make, you know, he tried to attack Egypt, he won it first and then he lost, due to the rise of Rome. Because he lost due to the rise of Rome, he got mad and took it out on Israel, and that's where Hanukkah came about. And that's what the book of Maccabees, which is not the Bible, but it's got historical, you know, historically valid material in it. That's what the book of Maccabees tells you, explains that lapse, okay? But the Maccabees were usurpers. The Maccabees, it started out with this guy Mattanias, who was of the first priestly course of Jehoiarib, which you can find in 1 Chronicles 24. Unfortunately, even the Cambridge scholars don't know that. They don't know the Bible well enough to know where Mattanias came from, because they don't read the Bible. They don't trust it. All right. He was of the first priestly course. He was not of the sons of Aaron. He was not of the sons of David. And his son, Judas, not necessarily Judas, but Simon, ends up trying to usurp both the priestly house of Aaron and the kingship. And Mary, of course, was supposed to be, you know, her line from Zerubbabel on down was supposed to be the ruler. Okay, so they get displaced by the Maccabees, because the Maccabees said, "Wow, we defeated this, you know, son of the generals of Alexander, so we ought to be kings and priests instead." And that's where it all got corrupted. And then, of course, that produced the son of Simon was John Hyrcanus, who comes to power about 135 BC. And then Herod gets mixed up with Hyrcanus's family, and then Herod makes nice with Antony. And then, of course, at that point, that's when Caesar dies, and Augustus, who was then called Octavian, and Antony sort of get into the little triumvirate with Lepidus. I think it was Lepidus, or was that Julius Caesar? They get into a triumvirate, and then they fight with each other. And then Octavian defeats Antony at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. And after doing that, he, you know, makes his way through Egypt, and, of course, he takes Palestine in suit. And, of course, Pompey had already done that back in 63 with the help of Herod Antipater, the father of Herod, who became Herod the Great, who's the Herod at the time Christ is born. You see what a soap opera this is? All this Mary's going to be referencing, but she's got to tie back to Daniel to show the continuity in her time poem. Now, how is she doing that? I know she's doing it. These numbers are all doctrinally significant, but I don't know exactly where she's starting. You know, Daniel took me forever to figure out that Daniel's first introducing, you know, his date line is here. He's saying, "Hi, I'm praying in the 49th year of the temple being down," because he was supposed to. And then this is his second date line. He's saying he's now counting back to Psalm 90, which ends at 1050 BC. See, 350 syllables from 1400 BC is 1050 BC. See, that's when the Judges end. That's what the book of Judges, why it was written, is to show that Moses, you know, what Moses predicted came true. And then the next thing Daniel does is he dates back to David's reign starting at Hebron, because what Isaiah had done is he started with David's birth here and ends with his death. That's what the 77, see, the 77. The 77 is David's death age, which scholars also don't know about because they're busy looking at Josephus instead of the Bible. God, it makes me sick. How, you know, if you're a Bible scholar, look at the Bible, not at other scholars. And certainly don't look at Josephus. No offense, but a lot of what that guy wrote is just garbage. Anyway, so she's got to play on this syncopated pattern of Daniel, and so she's probably going to do what Daniel's doing. He first introduces dateline. He has a second dateline tying back to Moses. Then he starts with David's reign in order to tie back to Isaiah, who starts at David's birth. Okay? And then he goes through a chronological timeline of the Israel's kings. Each one of them. You can see this on screen and read the doc. It'll take you forever to read it. I'm sorry. It took me forever to write it. And then he comes full circle to the rise of Macedon, so that he's showing, you know, what's the meaning. He knows the meaning of what God showed him as far as, you know, that man of time with the head of gold and the chest of silver, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Where is Mary doing this? I don't know yet. But at least if you were a masochist and you've gone this far in the video, you understand a little better about how this works and that it's a real pattern. And it's really obvious that somehow, even if I got individual syllables wrong, I got these paragraphs right, because they're doctrinally meaningful. Now, if you see something else, I want to know. But maybe as a result of watching this video, masochist that you are, you too have a better sense of it, and maybe you'll come up with something that I don't know about. If so, please tell me.